What is your favorite scene from The Lord of the Rings? Well, mine is the Ride of the Rohirrim, which may be quite a popular choice. There are certainly a lot to choose from in all three movies. There's no shortage of epic battles, fierce sword fights, and nail-biting cliffhangers. But there is one particular scene from The Return of the King, which doesn't have any of those, but is still one of my favorites. I'm talking about the lighting of the Warning Beacons of Gondor. In the books, it is only a single paragraph, but the filmmakers have created this brilliant sequence with inspiring music and breathtaking visuals of the landscapes. And then of course there is this line.
And Rohan will answer. Muster the Rohirrim!
These films were some of the first ones that I've ever watched in the theater, and I remember wanting to visit those locations when I was going to grow up. I'm sure this scene, like the rest of the movie, was a huge boon for New Zealand's tourism industry. But not only do these beacons look beautiful, they also provide an ingenious way for communication. In a world without radio or telegraph, signal beacons can deliver an urgent message much faster than a rider or a messenger bird. In The Lord of the Rings, the call for aid was delivered just in time for Rohan to muster its forces, arrive at the Pelennor fields, and shatter Sauron's horde before he had taken Minas Tirith. But has there been a historical equivalent to this system? Turns out, warning beacons have been used for defensive communication throughout the history. Sentinels on the Great Wall of China used fires to warn about the approaching barbarians, and the Anglo-Saxons in medieval Britain coordinated their defense against the Vikings using this system of beacons. That's why there are so many places called Beacon Hill in the UK. But the system that is most similar to the Gondor's is the one devised in the Byzantine Empire in the 9th century. The year was 829 AD. Emperor Michael II had just died, leaving his 16-year-old son Theophilos the sole ruler of the Byzantine, or, as is properly called, Eastern Roman Empire. The empire, like Gondor in Tolkien's books, faced a threat from the east. But this threat was not orcs. The Abbasid Caliph Al-Mamun was looking to solidify his power by securing some victories against the Romans. The Arabs have been the adversaries of Eastern Roman Empire for centuries up to that point, but recently both states have been shaken by internal strife and didn't have much resources to spare on external conflicts. The border between the empire and the caliphate has been settled in the Taurus Mountains for more than a century. There were no large-scale conflicts, just the mutual raids. But since the civil war in the caliphate ended, this was about to change. War, however, was not the only field of competition between the caliphate and the empire. The two states were also competing in prestige. So Emperor Theophilos looked to outshine the caliph in splendor of his court, as well as check his military aggression. And he had a perfect man to help him in both. Leo the mathematician was a famous scholar and polymath of his age. According to the historian Theophanes Continuatus, Caliph Al-Mamun offered 2,000 pounds of gold for Leo's services, but Theophilos refused to let the Roman genius go to the Arabs and gave him a state-sponsored university position, complete with teaching assistants. Leo had come up with an incredibly elaborate installation in the imperial throne room, which was guaranteed to impress any foreign visitors. The arriving guests were met by the blast from two great golden organs studded with semi-precious stones and crystals. The steps to the throne were guarded by two lions of hammered gold. Beside the throne was a golden tree with golden birds on the branches. The throne itself could be raised by a mechanical device. Another mechanism could make the golden lions roar and the birds chirp using the hidden pipes. It was the biblical throne of Solomon, brought to life by Roman engineering and Leo's genius. But fancy throne rooms were not all of Leo's creations. He is also credited with designing, or at least perfecting, the Warning Beacon system. The chain stretched across Anatolia from the fortress of Lulon on the Arab border to the lighthouse of the Great Palace in Constantinople. 2 identical water clocks were installed at the endpoints of the chain. Each of 12 hours on the clock corresponded to a specific message. We do not know what the messages were, but can assume that they could have been corresponding to specific locations or types of the threat. This meant that the Lulon garrison might have to wait 12 hours before relaying the message, but it was still much faster than sending a messenger, who would have took a week to arrive at Constantinople. Once the fire at Lulon was lit, it could be seen by the watchers at the fort on Mount Argeios, who would light their own bonfire to be seen from the next spot in line. There were a total of 8 beacons placed 50 to 100 kilometers apart across Anatolia. Modern experiments show that the message, sent from Lulon, could have been received in Constantinople in under an hour. Tolkien also lists 8 beacons in the chain from Minas Tirith to Rohan, although the total distance covered by them is 3 times smaller than that between Constantinople and Lulon. The Byzantine system covered 450 miles, or 720 kilometers, while its fictional analog only covered around 150 miles, or 240 kilometers. So, how effective was the real-life warning beacon system? Unfortunately, the ancient sources aren't clear on that question, since not every raid is recorded in the chronicles. What we do know is that in 831, the emperor himself led the force against the Arab raid into Cappadocia and scored a major victory. This victory was so complete that Theophilos led his army into Arab territory and captured a lot of prisoners from the borderlands. Upon returning to Constantinople, he awarded himself a triumph. We can only guess whether or not the warning system was instrumental in this quick retaliation to Arab aggression, but it does seem likely. Later, however, Caliph al-Mamun led a huge army into Roman territory and laid a siege to the fortress of Lulon. Theophilos once again was quick to react, but this time the Arab numbers were overwhelming. The relief force was shattered and Lulon was lost. The Caliph wanted to keep the fortress and ordered the construction of a forward base in the nearby city of Tyana, but soon fell ill and died. His successor, Al-Mutasim, abandoned the project. The Eastern Romans had to endure another massive invasion before the Arab threat subsided. In the subsequent decades, the Caliphate started its decline, while the empire was on the rise. When the Arab raids receded, the beacon system was most likely cut back. Theophilus' son, Michael III, is accused of disbanding the system because the beacons were distracting people from the chariot races, but this claim is generally dismissed as the part of a propaganda campaign in favor of the succeeding Macedonian dynasty. We have no information on what was happening to the beacon chain when Anatolia was captured by the Turks in the 11th century, but historian Clive Foss states that when the lands were regained by the Eastern Romans, Emperor Emmanuel I ordered the restoration of the warning system. Similar beacon system was later built in Greece, so from this we can surmise that it had proven itself useful. Such small aspects of this era aren't well chronicled, so one has to dig deep into historical research to find more information. Tolkien has taken many inspirations from the history of the Middle Ages and late antiquity, and the Kingdom of Gondor has a lot of features that make it similar to the Eastern Roman Empire. Today we have covered one of the similarities between the two nations, and in the future I hope to highlight more apparent ones and uncover those which are more subtle. But for now, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon.